This is a rewritten version of the chapter, crafted with a cinematic and emotionally charged tone suitable for a professional storytelling narration. Chapter 1. The paper ghost. The iron gates of the Woods mansion groaned as they swung open, a sound that felt like a dirge for the last 9 years of my life. I stepped out of the car, the humid air pressing against my skin like a physical weight. My hands were trembling, fine, rhythmic tremors that I couldn't suppress no matter how hard I clenched my fists. In the depths of my leather handbag sat a thick envelope. It was light, mere ounces of paper, yet it felt heavier than the house looming before me. The final divorce decree. The end of a mistake I had spent a decade trying to turn into a miracle. As I stepped into the foyer, the silence of the house greeted me, a cold, expensive silence that had always characterized my marriage. I followed the low murmur of voices toward the kitchen, my footsteps muffled by the plush rugs. I stopped just outside the arched doorway, the words drifting toward me, freezing the very marrow in my bones. "I still don't understand, Daddy." Noah's voice was small, laced with a confusion no 7-year-old should have to carry. "Why can't you just live with Mommy and me?" I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. I had done this for him. I had ended it so he wouldn't have to grow up in a house where love was a ghost. And resentment was the only thing that felt alive. "You know why, Noah," Rowan replied. His voice was soft. It was a tone he reserved exclusively for our son. To me, his voice had only ever been a sharpened blade, cold, flat, and clinical. "Your mother and I, we aren't together anymore." "But why?" Noah pressed. He was my son, through and through. He didn't want excuses, he wanted the truth. "Don't you love her?" The air seemed to vanish from the hallway. I leaned my shoulder against the cold marble wall, closing my eyes. I knew the answer. I had lived the answer for 3,000 days, but a desperate, pathetic part of me still waited, breathless, for him to lie. For him to say something, anything, that didn't sound like a death knell. The silence stretched, agonizingly long. I heard Rowan clear his throat, the sound of a man cornered by the innocence of his own child. "Noah," he began, his voice strained. "Dad, do you love Mommy or not?" A heavy sigh followed. "I love her for giving me you," Rowan finally whispered. It wasn't an admission of love, it was a diplomatic evasion, a polite way of saying *no. I squeezed my eyes shut, a single hot tear escaping to track a path down my cheek. 9 years. I had given him my youth, my devotion, and my soul. I had birthed his child and maintained his home. And yet, I was still nothing more than the vessel that had delivered his son. In our marriage, there had always been 3 people. Rowan, myself, and the shadow of the woman he had actually wanted. The woman I had effectively stolen him from 9 years ago in a moment of desperate, selfish weakness. I had spent a decade paying for that sin, and today, the debt was finally settled. "Has anyone ever told you it's rude to eavesdrop?" The voice was like a bucket of ice water. I snapped my eyes open and squared my shoulders, wiping the moisture from my face before I stepped into the kitchen. Rowan was leaning against the granite island, his gray eyes piercing and judgmental. Even in his casual clothes, he looked every bit the powerful, untouchable Rowan Woods. Beside him, Noah sat on a stool, a half-eaten sandwich forgotten in front of him. Noah's face lit up the moment. He saw me. "Mommy!" He scrambled down and threw his arms around my waist. I buried my face in his hair, breathing him in the scent of sunshine and childhood. He was the only beautiful thing to come out of this wreckage. "I missed you, my love," I whispered, kissing his forehead. When I looked up, Rowan's gaze was on his watch, his expression one of sharp annoyance. This house, this dream home, was a constant reminder of my failure. He had designed it years ago with *her in mind. Every color, every tile, every window was a tribute to a woman who wasn't me. "What are you doing here, Ava?" he snapped, his voice dropping an octave into a growl. "You promised you wouldn't interrupt my time with him. I'm not here to stay." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope, sliding it across the counter toward him. "The decree came through today. I thought you'd want your copy immediately, and I'm here to take Noah home." Rowan's face turned to stone. His jaw tightened so hard I thought I heard bone grind. He didn't touch the envelope. He looked at it as if it were a poisonous snake. "Noah, go upstairs and grab your backpack," Rowan commanded, his eyes never leaving mine. "No fighting." Noah asked, looking between us with wary eyes. "No fighting, buddy. Go on," Rowan said, though his tone suggested a storm was brewing. The moment Noah's footsteps faded on the stairs, the dam broke. Rowan slammed his fist onto the counter, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You couldn't have sent this to the office, he hissed, his gray eyes flashing with a sudden, violent heat. You had to come here to my home and flaunt it. Rowan, I just thought, no, you don't get to think anymore. He stepped toward me, his presence suffocating. You turned my life into a prison 9 years ago. You trapped me in a life I never wanted. And then you decide to end it on a whim. Was this your final move to hurt me? To take my son away because you finally realized I'll never love you. His words were bullets, and they hit with lethal precision. Newsflash, Ava, he leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear, his voice a jagged whisper. I fucking hate you, I gasped, the air leaving my lungs as if he had physically struck me. I looked into his eyes and saw it, the raw, unfiltered truth. All the years of cold silences and distant glances had finally fermented into this, pure, unadulterated loathing. I struggled to find a word, a defense, a goodbye. But there was nothing left to say to a man who saw me as his jailer rather than his wife. Just get out, he snapped, turning his back on me. Leave the papers and get out of my house. I'll bring Noah home when our time is officially up. I turned to go, my vision blurring, when the sharp trill of my phone cut through the tension. I pulled it out, my fingers. Fumbling, Mother, she never called. Not unless the world was ending. I answered, my voice trembling. Mother, Ava, get to the hospital, now. Her voice was hysterical, a sound I had never heard from the stoic woman who raised me. Your father, oh God, Ava, your father has been shot. The phone slipped from my nerveless fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The world tilted on its axis. Ava, Rowan's voice was different now, the anger replaced by a sharp, sudden edge of alarm. What is it? What happened? I looked at him, but I didn't see the man who hated me. I saw the only person I had leaned on for a decade, even if he had never leaned back. My father, I whispered, my heart freezing over. He's been shot. Here is a rewritten version of Chapter 2, crafted with a cinematic and emotionally charged tone, perfect for a storytelling narrative. *Chapter 2, The Echo of Silence, I have to go. Please stay with Noah, I don't know how long this will take. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, hollow and distant. I fumbled with my handbag, my fingers numb. Rowan said something in response, something about getting his mother to babysit, but his words were drowned out by a deafening roar in my ears. It was the sound of a life being upended in a single heartbeat. I didn't wait. I couldn't. I kissed my son's forehead, walked out the door, and climbed into my car. As I gripped the steering wheel, the road ahead blurred into a haze of memory. They say blood is thicker than water, but in the Sharp family, blood was merely a reminder of where you stood in the hierarchy. Growing up, I wasn't just the middle child, I was the invisible one. My father, James, had eyes only for Emma, his baby girl, his princess. My mother lived and breathed for Travis, her golden boy. And then there was me, just Ava. I was a ghost in my own home, a stranger looking through a window at a happy family that didn't have a seat for me at the table. I chased straight A's, excelled in sports, and joined every club imaginable, hoping for a crumb of validation. It never came. I remained on the sidelines of their lives, a shadow in the background of their portraits. Then came the incident 9 years ago. That was the day the silence became permanent. Travis and my father didn't just ignore me, they treated my presence like a stain they couldn't scrub away. My mother only called when there was a duty to fulfill, her voice as cold as a winter morning. And Emma. My sister's last words to me still echoed in the dark corners of my mind. You're dead to me, I no longer have a sister. Now, as I accelerated toward the hospital, I felt a sickening sense of vertigo. My father had been shot. He was fighting for his life, yet all I felt was nothing, just a cold, paralyzing numbness. Is it a sin to feel nothing for the man who spent a lifetime making you feel like nothing? The drive was a journey through the wreckage of my past. The rejection from my family, the abandonment by my husband, the cruelty of my in-laws, it was a heavy cloak I had worn for years. The only light in my world, the only person who truly saw me, was Noah. I pulled into the hospital parking lot, the engine cutting out with a sharp click. The evening air was crisp, ruffling my hair as I stepped out. I took a deep, steadying breath, squared my shoulders, and walked into the sterile, fluorescent glare of the building. I'm looking for James Sharp, I told the receptionist, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. I believe he was brought in with a gunshot wound. The woman didn't look up immediately. Relation? He's my father. She typed a few keys, her face unreadable. He's in the ER being prepped for surgery. Follow the hallway to the end, through the double doors. You'll find your family there. your family. The words felt like a joke. Every step down that hallway felt heavier than the last. I whispered a frantic prayer to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Let him be okay, not for my sake but for Noah's. My father was a stranger to me, but he was a grandfather to my son, and for that alone I needed him to live. I pushed open the heavy doors. The air in the waiting room was thick with the scent of antiseptic and despair. I saw them immediately, my mother and Travis. "Mother, Travis," I said softly. They looked up, and the sight of them hit me like a physical blow. My mother's blue sundress, the kind she wore for Sunday brunches, was splattered with dark, drying crimson. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face a mask of raw grief. Travis sat beside her, his jaw tight, his eyes dry but burning with a quiet fury. He was the anchor holding her down before she floated away into madness. I sat down beside her, the distance between us feeling like an ocean. "What happened? How is he?" New tears spilled down my mother's cheeks. "He was coming back from the store, right outside the house," she choked out. "2 shots, the doctor said. One pierced his lung, the other his kidney. They're taking him in now." I wanted to reach out. I wanted to hold her hand, to offer the comfort a daughter should. But I stayed frozen. I knew my touch wouldn't be the one she wanted. "He's strong," I said, the words feeling brittle. "He'll make it through this." She didn't answer. She just sobbed into her stained sleeves. A moment later, the double doors swung open. Orderlies wheeled a gurney out, the metal rattling rhythmically. My father lay there, pale and diminished in a thin hospital gown. Travis and my mother bolted to their feet, rushing to the side of the bed. I stayed in my chair, a spectator to a tragedy I wasn't allowed to star in. I knew if he opened his eyes, I was the last person he'd want to see. He'd be looking for Emma. I watched as he reached out a weak hand to wipe a tear from my mother's face. He whispered something to Travis. Final command, perhaps, and my brother nodded with a grim, solemn determination. Then, just before they wheeled him toward the operating theater, my father pressed a crumpled piece of paper into my mother's hand. She let out a broken wail as she kissed him goodbye. The doors closed, and the silence returned, heavier than before. We waited. Minutes turned into agonizing hours. I paced the linoleum floors until my legs ached. I bought coffee that no one drank. We were 3 people bound by blood but separated by 1,000 unspoken grievances. 2.5 hours later, the surgeon emerged. He didn't have to say a word. The slump of his shoulders told the story. He went into cardiac arrest, the doctor said, his voice hushed and rehearsed. "We did everything we could, but the damage was too extensive. I'm so sorry for your loss." The sound that left my mother's throat wasn't human. It was a primal, animalistic scream of pure agony. Her knees gave out and Travis caught her, pulling her into his arms as they both sank to the floor, weeping for the man who had been their world. I stood there, anchored to the spot, watching my family crumble. James Sharp was dead. And as the reality settled into my bones, one chilling thought rose above the rest. Emma would have to come home, and nothing would ever be the same again. Here is a rewritten version of the chapter, crafted with a cinematic and emotionally charged tone, perfect for a storytelling video or a dramatic audiobook. Chapter 3. The return of the golden child. The hospital waiting room was a sanctuary of sterile silence, broken only by the rhythmic, agonizing sound of my mother's sobbing. I sat on a hard plastic chair that felt like ice against my skin, focusing on the simple mechanics of survival. Breath in, breath out. My heart ached for her, even as my own world felt like it was tilting on its axis. Losing the man you love, suddenly, violently, is a trauma that leaves no room for grace. My father was gone. It felt like a cruel joke. One moment I was bracing myself for his recovery, the next I was staring at the empty space where a giant of a man used to be. We had never seen eye to eye. He had looked at me with a resentment that bordered on hatred for years. And yet, I loved him. He was the architect of my life, the man who gave me a name, and despite the scars he left on my spirit, I couldn't simply switch off the grief. A shadow fell over me. "Are you okay?" It was Rowan. He had arrived an hour ago, a silent sentinel in the corner of the room. This was the first time he'd spoken to me. I looked up, searching his face for a flicker of the man I knew, but he was a stranger today. His concern felt brittle, a courtesy rather than a comfort. "I'm fine," I managed, my voice sounding like gravel. I hadn't cried. Not once. Perhaps it was the shock, or perhaps I had simply bled all my tears for him years ago. While the rest of the family fell apart, I was the only one left standing, a lonely lighthouse in a storm that didn't want me there. In my peripheral vision, I saw a pair of polished shoes. I looked up to find Travis looming over me. His eyes were twin pools of frost. No matter how much time passed, he never looked at me with anything less than contempt. I knew I had made mistakes. I knew I had broken things that couldn't be mended, but hadn't I paid enough? "What is it, Travis?" I asked, my voice weary. "Mom called Emma when Dad was shot," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She's on her way. She doesn't know yet that he didn't make it." Beside me, I heard Rowan's breath hitch. It was a sharp, jagged intake of air. That was all it took. Just the mention of her asterisk name, and the fragile warmth he had offered me moments ago evaporated. He went cold, his posture stiffening, and I knew, with a soul-crushing certainty, that I had lost him all over again. "I figured," I whispered. There was nothing else to say. I hadn't spoken to my sister in years. Why would she want to see the person she blamed for ruining her life? "I expect you to be cordial," Mother snapped, wiping a stray tear from her cheek with a trembling hand. "Give her space. Do not make this about you." "Mother, you know what you're asking is impossible," I replied, my chest tightening. "I don't care about what's possible," she hissed, her voice cracking with a sudden, sharp venom. "You ran my daughter off 9 years ago with your betrayal. I won't let you do it again. Not now. Not when your father is gone and this family is all we have left." The words felt like physical blows. They loved to use the past as a whip. "In case you've forgotten," I said, standing up. As the anger finally flickered to life in my gut, "I am also your daughter, or am I already dead to you too?" I didn't wait for her answer. I couldn't. I turned and walked out, the heavy double doors swinging shut behind me. Outside, the night air was a shock to my system. I breathed it in, letting the cold bite at my lungs. I wanted to run. I wanted to walk away from this hospital, this family, and this life and never look back. They didn't want me. They never had. I was the ghost at their feast, the stain on their perfect tapestry. "Ma'am, are you James Sharp's daughter?" A nurse stood there, her expression softened by professional sympathy. I nodded slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. "They're viewing the body now. You're needed inside," she said softly. "Give me a minute," I replied. I stood there for a long moment, standing on the precipice of a choice. I could leave. I could end the cycle of pain right now. But despite the neglect James Sharp had provided for me, I owed him a final goodbye. I would bury him, and then I would bury my relationship with the rest of them. I found my way to the morgue. The rest of the family had already finished. The room was empty and smelled of ozone and endings. I walked to the slab and looked down at him. He looked peaceful. For the first time in my life, his brow wasn't furrowed in disappointment. He looked like he was merely sleeping, but the stillness was too absolute. The man was gone, only the shell remained. "Goodbye, Father," I whispered. I took one last look before turning away, shaking off the heaviness in my chest. I wasn't just saying goodbye to him. I was saying goodbye to the fantasy that they would ever love me. When I returned to the waiting area, I chose the furthest seat in the corner. Mother was buried in paperwork. Travis was staring blankly at the wall. Rowan was gone. And then it happened. The doors swung open, and the atmosphere in the room shifted violently. It was Emma. She was exactly as I remembered, yet more radiant in her grief, long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, legs that seemed to go on forever, a face that belonged on a cameo. She was the sun, and the rest of us were just dust motes in her light. Travis was on his feet in an instant, pulling her into an embrace I had never received. He whispered to her, shielding her, comforting her. The old familiar ache of longing flared in my chest, but I pushed it down. Then Rowan appeared. He stopped dead in his tracks. I watched his knees literally buckle. I watched his Adam's apple bob as he struggled to swallow. "Emma!" Her name came out of him like a prayer or a sob. Her head snapped toward him. The moment their eyes met, the rest of the world ceased to exist. The hospital, the death, the grief, it all faded into the background. There was only the two of them. They moved toward each other with a magnetic intensity that made my blood run cold. Before I could even blink, she was in his arms, and he was holding her as if she were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. Seeing Travis hug her had hurt, but seeing Rowan hold her, that destroyed me. It was a truth I had tried to hide from for 9 years, finally laid bare in the fluorescent light of a hospital hallway. Emma was back, and Rowan was still, and would always be, hopelessly in love with her. This is a rewritten version of Chapter 4, crafted with a cinematic and emotionally resonant tone, perfect for a storytelling narrative. #Chapter 4. Shards of a broken soul, have you ever felt your heart pass through a meat grinder? Piece by piece, shredded until there is nothing left but a raw, pulsing ache. That is the only way to describe the carnage inside my chest as I stand there, a ghost haunting the hallways of my own life, watching them. If I could reach into my ribs, pull out this useless, bleeding organ, and hurl it into the abyss, I would. The pain isn't just emotional, it's visceral. It's a physical weight crushing the air from my lungs. I want to run. I want to scream. I want to look anywhere but at the scene unfolding before me. But my eyes are traitors. Glued to the intimacy of the two people who just destroyed my world. I watch them pull apart, slowly, reluctantly. Rowan's eyes, usually as cold as flint, soften into a look of pure, unadulterated adoration as he gazes at Emma. She is his North Star, the love he never truly let go of. He cups her face in his hands, his touch so tender it makes my skin crawl. He doesn't kiss her. Instead, he leans in and rests his forehead against hers. It's worse than a kiss. It's a soul-deep recognition. In that moment, Rowan looks peaceful. He looks like a traveler who has finally stumbled through his front door after years in the wilderness. He looks whole. "I've missed you," I read the words as they form on his lips, a silent prayer meant only for her. A poisonous thought drips into my mind. What if they had met like this while we were still married? Would he have betrayed me? Part of me wants to scream asterisk no asterisk to defend the man I thought I knew. But looking at them now, I realize the truth. This is Emma. Rowan would walk through the fires of hell and back just to catch her scent. I was never his home. I was just a temporary shelter from the rain. Unable to breathe, I turn and stumble outside, my legs feeling like lead. The moment the cold air hits my face, the dam breaks. The tears don't just fall, they scald. It hurts so much I feel like I'm dying, and I don't know how to make it stop. But who is there to blame? I was the fool who fell in love with a man who never belonged to me. Please. I whisper to the empty night, clutching my stomach. Please, just make it stop. Silence is my only answer. There is no reprieve. My chest constricts, my throat closing up as if invisible hands are strangling me. I am fading. I am disappearing into the dark. This is the price of greed, isn't it? A mocking voice cuts through the fog of my despair. This is what happens when you try to keep a man who was never yours to hold. I stiffen. Travis. What do you want, Travis? I don't look at him. If you're here to sharpen your tongue or warn me to stay away from your precious sister, save your breath. Go back to the hospital. Go back to your family. There's nothing for you here. I wipe my face aggressively, pulling my shattered mask back into place. I refuse to let him see the ruins of my heart. I won't give any of them the satisfaction of watching me break. Travis pauses, genuine shock flickering across his features. I suppose he didn't expect the docile wife to bite back. I was just making sure you understood, he says, his voice dropping to a low, cruel hum. Rowan always belonged to Emma. Your selfishness stole years from them, but the universe is finally correcting itself. Don't get in the way of their happiness. They've waited long enough. A jagged, hollow laugh escapes my throat. Oh, don't you worry, I mumble, the bitterness coating my tongue like acid. I won't get in anyone's way ever again. After today, none of you will ever have to put up with me again. He narrows his eyes, his brow furrowed in confusion. What is that supposed to mean? I don't answer. I'm too exhausted to explain that I am a woman who has reached her limit. All I want is the mercy of sleep, to crawl into bed, cry until my eyes are swollen shut, and hope the morning brings a version of me that feels less like glass. Tell your mother I'll be by to help with the burial preparations. If she can stand the sight of me, I say, my voice trembling. And tell your sister I said hello. I turn my back on him and head for my car. I hear him calling my name, but I don't stop. I can't. I need to get home before I shatter into 1,000 pieces on the pavement. The drive is a blur. Rowan told me earlier that Noah was with his mother. I'm relieved. I don't have the strength to face another person who despises me tonight. He's safe. I'll pick him up tomorrow. When I step into the house, the silence is deafening. Every corner of the rooms we shared reminds me of how profoundly alone I am. I have no one to hold me, no one to tell me it will be okay. I have no one in this world, except for Noah. I collapse against the door, the tears starting all over again. I am so tired of crying, yet the well never runs dry. If I could go back in time, would I change things? Would I find a man who could actually love me back? But the past is a tomb. Once it's closed, you can never change what's inside. 3 days have passed since my father died, and the world has turned into a gray, turbulent sea. James Sharp was a titan, well-known, well-loved by the community. His death has sent shockwaves through everyone. Except for me, I am just numb. I haven't seen Rowan since that night at the hospital. He's called, his name flashing on my screen like a warning, but I ignored him every time. I can already picture him, tucked away in Emma's embrace, perhaps already moving her into the spaces I once occupied. I don't need his pity, and I certainly don't need him rubbing his newfound joy in my face. I take a deep breath, focusing on the mechanical task of zipping up my black lace dress. "Mommy?" I turn to see Noah standing in the doorway. His small face is pale, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. My heart, which I thought was dead, gives a painful throb. I kneel down, opening my arms to him. "What is it, my love?" "I miss him so much," he sobs, his voice breaking. "We were supposed to go fishing this Saturday, he promised." James Sharp may have been a cold, distant, and terrible father to me, but to Noah he was a hero. He was the grandfather who held his hand and told him stories. I pull my son into my chest, holding him tight. I whisper soothing words against his hair, even as his tears soak into the fabric of my mourning dress. "I know, baby, I know it hurts," I murmur. "But he's with the angels now. He's watching over you from the clouds. He can never truly leave you because he lives right here." I press my hand over his heart. "And in every memory you keep right here." I touch his forehead. I pull back, wiping his cheeks with my thumbs. "Besides, Grandpa wouldn't want you to be sad. Do you want to make him sad on his big day?" Noah shakes his head vigorously, sniffing. "Good, here is what we're going to do. Today we aren't going to focus on the goodbye. We're going to hold on to every wonderful memory you have with him, okay? I have so few good memories of my own to hold on to, but for Noah I will help him guard his." "Okay," he whispers, a look of resolve crossing his young face. I stand up, grabbing my purse and reaching for his hand. He takes it, looking up at me for strength I'm not sure I possess. "Now," I say, my voice steady for the first time in days, "let's go give your grandpa the send-off he deserves." It was time to face the world. It was time to say goodbye. The sun was a liar that day. It spilled over the city in a deceptive, golden warmth, mocking the cold weight in my chest as I drove through the familiar streets. Looking at the bright sky, you'd never guess that the world was about to fracture. The chapel was suffocatingly full. It seemed everyone had come to pay their final respects, a sea of black attire and rehearsed grief. As I scanned the room, checking the arrangements one last time, a bitter realization settled in my gut. I had shouldered this entire burden alone. Not one of them had lifted a finger for the burial preparations. I didn't complain, though. This was my final gift to him, a quiet way to repay the man who had given me a roof, clothes, and a seat at a table where I never quite felt I belonged. As the service prepared to begin, I steered Noah toward the back, choosing a row on the opposite side of the aisle from the main family. I couldn't bring myself to sit with them. I didn't belong in their circle of pure grief, and I certainly didn't belong next to Emma. "Mom, why are we sitting here?" Noah whispered, his small hand tugging at mine as he pointed toward the front. "Shouldn't we be with Grandma?" I felt the weight of a dozen judgmental stares prickling at my skin. The family's disdain for me wasn't a secret. It was a scar I wore every day. "The seats are mostly full, honey," I lied, my voice tight. "I don't want to cause a scene by moving now." Noah looked at me with those perceptive eyes of his, clearly unconvinced, but he stayed quiet. Just as the priest stepped up to the pulpit, a sudden shift in the air made the hairs on my neck stand up. A familiar scent, expensive, woody, and haunting, reached me before he did. "Rowan," I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mixture of panic and old, stubborn longing. Why wasn't he with Emma? He belonged at her side, comforting his perfect choice. "Dad!" Noah's whisper was a joyful hiss, drawing a few annoyed glances from the rows ahead. I glared back at them, my protective instincts flaring, even as my own soul felt like it was retreating into a dark corner. "Can I sit between you guys?" Noah asked, looking from me to Rowan. Relief washed over me, sharp and cold. "Of course," I whispered. We shifted, placing Noah as a human buffer between us. Only then could I breathe again, though the air still felt heavy with Rowan's proximity. The preacher's voice droned on, a somber rhythm against the backdrop of my racing thoughts. "We all must leave this world one day," he intoned. "The question is, how will you leave it? Will you have changed the lives of those you met? Or will you leave behind nothing but regrets?" The words felt like a physical blow. If I died today, who would truly mourn? The people in this room would likely breathe a sigh of relief, perhaps even throw a feast to celebrate the departure of the family's greatest disappointment. Only Noah would care. Just him. It was a hollow realization. I had spent my entire life living in Emma's radiant, suffocating shadow. She was the beauty, the genius, the saint. I was the leftover, the mistake, the one who was never quite enough. Even now, as adults, the script hadn't changed. Her pain was always deeper, her happiness always more important. I was just the girl chasing the crumbs of affection she dropped. "Mommy," Noah's soft voice pulled me back from the abyss. The service was over. The crowd was beginning to filter out toward the cemetery. "Ava, are you okay?" The depth of Rowan's voice made me shiver. I refused to look at him. I couldn't risk it, not with the image of him looking at Emma with such raw devotion still burned into my mind. We were tied together for the next 10 years by a custody agreement, but that didn't mean I had to let him see how much I was bleeding inside. "Come on, Noah. Let's go," I said, my voice clipped. Outside. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and artificial sympathy. People crowded around, murmuring condolences that felt like empty noise. In the distance, I saw my colleagues and offered a weary wave, feeling utterly drained. "So, you finally decided to show your face." The voice was like a lash. I turned to find Emma standing there. Even with her eyes red and her face blotchy from crying, she looked like a tragic goddess. It was infuriating. "Not now, Emma," I sighed, exhaustion vibrating in my bones. "Can we just get through the burial first?" She stepped closer, a chilling, sharp smile cutting through her mask of grief. She leaned in, her voice a poisonous whisper meant only for me. "We'll bury him, all right, but don't get comfortable. I'm back, Ava. You took my family once, but I'm taking everything. Back, including the man who was always meant to be mine." She pulled away, leaving me reeling. I wanted to laugh, but the sound would have been too jagged. She didn't understand. There was nothing to take. The family already worshipped her. And Rowan had never been mine to begin with. I led Noah toward the graveside, keeping my distance from the inner circle. My mother, Emma, and Travis stood huddled together, a united front of grief. I stood on the periphery, a stranger at my own father's funeral. Dust to dust. The sound of soil hitting the casket was final. My mother's wails tore through the quiet afternoon, a haunting, desperate sound. Emma and Travis held her, their own tears flowing silently. I held Noah, pulling him against my side as he sobbed. I wiped my own stray tears, forcing myself to be the pillar he needed. As the crowd began to thin, Noah spotted Rowan's parents nearby, standing with Rowan and his twin, Gabriel. "Mom, look, it's Pa and Ma." Noah pulled at my hand. The interaction was stiff. Rowan's parents acknowledged me with the kind of cool politeness reserved for an unwanted guest. I was the woman who had trapped their son, the one they never wanted. "Can I go get snacks with them?" Noah asked, his stomach likely growling after the long day. I nodded, watching him walk away with them. Suddenly, I was alone with Rowan. The silence between us was deafening. He wasn't even looking at me. His gaze was fixed on Emma, who stood a few yards away, looking frail and broken. I opened my mouth to excuse myself, to run away from the suffocating tension when a sound shattered the peace of the cemetery, the screech of tires. It happened in a heartbeat. A black SUV swung around the bend and masked men leaned out, their hands gripping cold steel. The air exploded with the rhythmic asterisk crack 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 of gunfire. Panic erupted. Screams drowned out the birdsong. My eyes flew to Rowan. In that split second of life or death, I saw his instinct take over. He didn't turn to me. He didn't look for the mother of his child. He lunged through the air, throwing his entire weight onto Emma, shielding her body with his own as they hit the grass. The sight broke me more than any bullet could. I stood there, frozen in the line of fire, watching the man I loved risk everything for the woman he had always preferred. I wasn't his priority. I wasn't even an afterthought. "Watch out," a voice roared. A man in a tactical vest collided with me, slamming me toward the ground, but he was a second too late. A searing, white-hot iron punched into my side. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs, sending me sprawling into the dirt. The world began to tilt. The screaming grew distant, muffled by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. "Someone call an ambulance," the man yelled, his hands pressing down hard on my waist. I looked down, dazed. My dress, once black and somber, was turning a slick, dark crimson. The sight of the blood, my blood, sent a wave of cold through my limbs. "Oh, God," I wheezed, my vision blurring into gray smudges. "Noah." His name was the last thing I whispered before the golden sun went black. Chapter 6. The ice within Rowan, there is a violent, soul-piercing kind of silence that follows a gunshot. It's a vacuum that sucks the air out of your lungs, leaving only the metallic tang of gunpowder and the sudden, terrifying realization of mortality. But as I stood in that gray, desolate cemetery, nothing compared to the internal shattering I felt when I saw her. Ava, the mother of my child, my ex-wife. She was crumpled on the frozen earth like a broken doll, her blood blooming like a dark, macabre flower against the frost. When those barrels leveled toward us, I hadn't hesitated. I didn't calculate the odds or weigh the consequences. My instincts, raw and primal, had screamed a single name, Emma. I knew my son, Noah, was safe with my parents, and in that split second between life and death, I had lunged. I threw myself over Emma, shielding her with every inch of my body, fully prepared to take a bullet to the spine if it meant she breathed another secondary. I was ready to die for her. The shooters vanished the moment the sirens began to wail, but my relief was a fragile, rotting thing. It died the instant an officer screamed for an ambulance. I turned, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, looking for the casualty. I never expected it to be Ava. Seeing her there, broken, her skin turning a ghostly, translucent pale against the backdrop of the graves, nearly brought me to my knees. The guilt was instantaneous, a serrated blade twisting in my gut. The hospital became a blur of sterile white corridors and the cloying, chemical scent of antiseptic. The police officer who had stayed by her side refused to leave until the surgeons took over. I felt a surge of irrational, hot-blooded irritation at his protectiveness. She was my wife, or she had been. But deeper than the jealousy was a searing self-loathing. I was the protector, the man who was supposed to keep his family whole. If Ava died, how could I ever look Noah in the eye? How could I explain that when the world went to hell, I had failed to shield his mother? I paced the waiting room like a caged predator, every second stretching into an eternity. The wall clock ticked with a steady, mocking rhythm. "Please, let her be okay," Kate whispered beside me. I glanced at her. For the first time, I saw a fracture in the obsidian armor of Ava's mother, the weight of losing her husband and nearly losing her. Daughter in the same breath had finally blunted her stony edges. We were all there, Travis, Gabe, Emma, huddled in the cold sanctuary of the waiting room. Only Noah was missing, tucked away from this waking nightmare. I finally collapsed into a plastic chair, my hands trembling uncontrollably. She has to be fine. For Noah, I told myself. Only for Noah. I lost track of time until the automatic doors hissed open. I bolted upright, expecting a doctor in blood-stained scrubs delivering a grim prognosis. Instead, I saw a ghost. Ava was standing at the nurse's station. Her left arm was immobilized in a heavy black sling, and her face was a mask of eerie, mechanical calm. She was signing discharge papers, her movements fluid and detached. She slid her credit card back into her bag with one hand and fumbled with her phone, her brow furrowed in a look of sheer exhaustion that she tried to hide behind a wall of concentration. "Ava," I called out, my voice cracking the heavy silence. She didn't stop. Her eyes remained fixed on her screen as she began to walk past us. I stepped into her path, and when she finally looked up, I felt a jolt of pure ice. Something had shifted deep within her. The woman standing before us wasn't the Ava I knew. The desperation, the longing for approval, the lingering warmth, it had all been cauterized. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was flat, hollow. "Did someone else get hurt?" "How are you?" Kate asked, her voice trembling with a rare maternal fear. Ava's gaze shifted to her mother, her eyes as cold as the winter sky. "Unfortunately for you, I'm not dead yet." The words hit the room like a physical blow. It wasn't just the sarcasm, it was the absolute, icy indifference in her tone. "Where do you think you're going?" I demanded, my protective instincts flaring up again unbidden. "Home," she said simply. "Your arm is in a sling, Ava. You're in no condition to drive. That's why I called an Uber." Kate stepped forward, her hands reaching out but not quite touching. "Ava, please, we need to talk. It's about your father, about why this happened." Ava turned to her mother. Her eyes were like shards of broken glass, beautiful but sharp enough to draw blood. "I don't see what that has to do with me. The last time I checked, he didn't consider me his daughter. Why should I care about his secrets now?" A sob broke from Kate's throat, but Ava didn't flinch. She didn't offer a hug or even a flicker of sympathy. It was as if she had flipped a switch, plunging her entire emotional landscape into darkness. She turned toward the exit but paused, her voice sharpening. "Where is my son?" "At my mother's house," Travis answered, his eyes narrowed as he studied this stranger who looked like his sister. Ava sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated irritation. Fine, looks like you'll get your talk after all. I'll drive you, I offered, taking a step toward her. Beside me, I felt Emma stiffen. She let out a small, sharp huff of breath, but I ignored it. Ava was hurt. She was Noah's mother. And despite the finality of our divorce, she had once been mine. No need, Ava said, not even looking at me. I'll take the Uber I already paid for. I'll meet you there. She walked out without another word. We stood there, stunned into a deafening silence. Usually, Ava would have jumped at the chance to be near me, to be in my car. Now, she treated me like a stranger she was forced to tolerate. Let's go, Kate said softly, before she changes her mind. We piled into my Cadillac Escalade, the air inside thick with tension. And the smell of expensive leather. I drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic and breaking speed limits, arriving at the estate just as Ava's Uber pulled away. Inside the house, the atmosphere was even more frigid. My parents and Gabe were already waiting. Ava walked in and took a seat, ignoring everyone's greetings. The old Ava would have tried to make small talk, tried to win them over despite their years of snubs. This Ava just looked bored, as if she were waiting for a tedious movie to end. Can we just get this over with? She snapped. I cleared my throat, leaning against the marble mantel. James came to me with a business proposal, a partnership. I agreed because it looked like a solid investment. Ava's brow furrowed slightly, but she remained silent, her one good hand resting casually on her lap. We signed the papers, I continued, the weight of the secret heavy on my tongue. Only to realize too late that the company was a front for a major criminal syndicate. Neither James nor I wanted our names dragged into that filth. We terminated the contracts and went straight to the police. I sighed, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to me. It turns out these people are high-priority targets. They didn't take the betrayal well. They went underground, and we thought the law would handle it. Kate took over, her voice shaking with the memory of the violence. They started threatening your father. They blamed him for the sting. They promised to make him pay by coming after those he loved. We thought they were bluffing, until they gunned him down in cold blood. Travis and Gabe looked away, their grief fresh and raw. Emma looked horrified, clutching her pearls. But Ava just stared at us with that same dead, icy expression. I still don't see, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel, how any of this involves me. She stood up, wincing slightly as she adjusted her sling. I'm taking Noah and I'm leaving. Damn it, Ava, I growled, my frustration finally boiling over. Are you even listening? You're in danger. You were asterisk shot today. Doesn't that mean anything to you? She glared at me, her eyes flashing with a sudden, searing heat. All it tells me is that I was in the right place at the wrong time. Ava, Kate started, her voice pleading. No, Ava cut her off, her voice rising in a rare display of emotion. They were after the three of you, not me. Everyone in the city knows I'm the outcast. Why would a gang waste a bullet on someone my own father didn't care about? The silence that followed was absolute. She turned her gaze to me, and for a moment, I felt like I was looking at a ghost of the woman I used to know. If you're worried about someone, Rowan, worry about the woman next to you. Emma was his perfect little princess. She's the target. Stop dragging me into a mess I had no part in creating. She scanned the room, her lip curling in a look of pure revulsion. And stop the fake concern. I don't need it. If I'm in danger, I'll handle it. I'd rather die in the street than accept protection from people who only remember I exist when bullets start flying. Kate looked as if she'd been slapped. Emma stood up, her face flushed with indignation. Stop being such a bitch, Ava. Just like always, you have to make everything about yourself. Ava let out a short, hollow laugh that sent chills down my spine. I don't know what world you live in, sister, but nothing is ever asterisk about me. It's always been you. I've lived without this family's protection my whole life. I don't need it now, it's fake, and I'm done with fake people. She turned her back on us, effectively erasing our existence from her world. Noah, she called out. A moment later, the thundering of small feet echoed through the hall. Noah burst into the room, stopping dead when he saw her. Mommy, what happened to your arm? He ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. The ice melted instantly. The transformation was staggering. Ava knelt, ignoring the pain of her injury, and pulled him into a fierce, one-armed embrace. Her face softened, her eyes shimmering with a desperate, all-consuming love she hadn't shown any of us. Nothing, my love, she whispered, kissing his forehead with a tenderness that ached to watch. I just bumped into a door and the doctor had to fix it. It's okay. Does it hurt? Noah asked, his lower lip trembling. Just a little. But I'll be fine if we can go home, eat some ice cream, and cuddle. What do you think? Noah beamed, his entire face lighting up like the sun. I can help, I'm a big boy. I'll take care of you and kiss the pain away, just like you do for me. We all watched them, the only two people in the world who seemed to truly belong to each other. The adoration between them was palpable, a stark contrast to the venom that had filled the room moments before. Noah looked over at Emma, his brow furrowing in confusion. Is that woman your sister, Mommy? Ava didn't even look back. Her voice was firm, final. No, Noah, I don't have a sister. Then, under her breath, so low I barely caught it, and I don't have a family. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Noah didn't seem to hear. He just turned and gave a small wave. Bye, Dad. Bye, kiddo, I managed to choke out, my throat tight. And then they were gone. The house fell into a tomb-like silence. I stared at the closed door, my mind reeling. I didn't recognize her. The woman who had spent years trying to earn a scrap of my affection, who had begged for her family's notice, was gone. In her place was someone cold, detached, and terrifyingly independent. I didn't like it, not one bit. Something deep inside me, a part of me I hadn't realized still cared, was screaming that I had just lost something I never even knew I possessed. And for the first time in my life, I was afraid I would never get it back. This is a rewritten version of Chapter 7, crafted with a more cinematic and emotionally resonant tone, perfect for a storytelling narrative. Chapter 7. The dead man, the morning light filtered through the curtains, but it brought no warmth to my aching body. I woke with a stiff back and a sharp, throbbing rhythm in my shoulder, a constant, rhythmic reminder of the lead that had nearly claimed my life. Beside me, Noah was still fast asleep. He had refused to leave my side last night, insisting with a child's stubbornness that he was taking his job seriously. He was my protector, he had said. A small, bittersweet smile tugged at my lips as I watched his peaceful face. With bated breath and slow, agonizing movements, I managed to slip out from under his arm without waking him. It was barely 8 o'clock. I needed to move. I needed the normalcy of a kitchen and the scent of coffee to drown out the lingering smell of hospital antiseptic. Downstairs, I stood in the doorway of my kitchen, staring at the pans. I was a one-armed chef today, my left arm bound in a sling, a heavy weight against my chest. As I clumsily gathered the ingredients for pancakes, the dam in my mind finally broke, and the memories of yesterday flooded back. The chaos, the scream of the bullet. The way the world tilted until the sky was all I could see. It felt like a fever dream, a nightmare I should have woken up from by now. But the bandages were real. The 4 stitches in my shoulder were real. The doctor's voice echoed in my head, a haunting whisper. You're lucky. Ava, a few inches lower, and that bullet would have found your heart. Lucky. That's what they called it. I didn't feel lucky. I felt discarded. As the batter sizzled in the pan, I thought of the man from the cemetery. The stranger who hadn't even known my name but had held my life in his hands while those who were supposed to love me looked the other way. My family, if you could even call them that, didn't care if I took my last breath on that grass. I made a silent vow to find him. I owed him a thank you that words could barely cover. A sharp knock at the door startled me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't expecting anyone, and frankly, I didn't want to see a soul. The events of the burial had soured my blood. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I pulled the door open slowly, and the breath caught in my throat. It was him. In the harsh light of day, he was even more striking. But it was his eyes that stopped me, the deepest, most piercing blue I had ever seen. Yesterday, through the haze of shock and pain, I hadn't truly seen him. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with a build that suggested strength without the vanity of a bodybuilder. He had a jawline that could cut glass and dark brown hair that fell in effortless, rugged waves. He exuded a raw, masculine confidence that seemed to pull the air right out of the room. "Hey," I croaked, my voice sounding like I'd swallowed sandpaper. He smiled, and for a moment the ache in my shoulder vanished. "Hey, can I come in?" "Yeah, sure," I stammered, stepping aside. He walked in, his presence filling the small entryway. He took a moment to scan the room, his gaze lingering on the photos on the mantel. "Nice home," he said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble. "Thank you," I mumbled, suddenly self-conscious of my messy hair and the sling. I just made pancakes. Would you like some?" He nodded, and I led him to the kitchen. But before I could reach for a plate, he stepped into my path, forcing me to look up at him. "We haven't been formally introduced," he said softly. "I'm Ethan." He reached out, gently taking my hand. Instead of a handshake, he turned it over and pressed his lips to my knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, intimate, and sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. I wasn't used to this. I was the boring sister, the one people walked past to get to someone else. "I am Ava," I managed to say. "I already know that, beautiful," he said with a devastating wink before sliding onto a stool at the kitchen island. I let out a nervous laugh, my heart racing for an entirely different reason now. "So, Ethan, with no last name, what exactly were you doing at my father's burial?" I asked, setting a steaming cup of coffee and a plate of pancakes in front of him. He took a bite, looking at me with an unreadable expression. "A threat had been reported," he explained. "Given the circumstances of your father's death, the chief wanted eyes on the scene in case the shooters decided to finish what they started with the rest of the family. So you're a cop?" I sat down across from him. "I've lived here a long time and I know almost everyone. I've never seen you." "I'm an officer, yes. I moved here a few months ago, but I've been buried in paperwork and cold cases. Haven't had much time to socialize." I smiled, feeling a strange, sudden warmth toward this man. "Well, consider me your first friend. I was actually wondering how to find you this morning." "Oh, and why is that?" "To thank you," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I don't remember much, but I remember you. I remember you holding me. I remember you shouting for help." I remembered how he had looked at me, like I mattered. Ethan leaned in, a playful glint in those blue eyes. "I was just doing my job, Ava. Besides, it's not every day I get to hold a beautiful woman in my arms, even if she does faint at the sight of a little blood." I felt the blush deepen, but this time I laughed. He was a charmer, no doubt about it, but he felt like a breath of fresh air in a life that had become stifling and dark. "How did you find out where I lived?" I asked. "Officer, remember?" He tapped his temple. "Finding people is what I do. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I couldn't stay at the hospital yesterday, duty called, but when I went back to check on you, you'd already been discharged. I figured showing up at your door in the middle of the night might be a bit much." I was stunned. This man, a stranger, had shown more genuine concern for my well-being in 24 hours than my own flesh and blood had shown in years. A lump formed in my throat. "Thank you, Ethan, truly." We spent the next 40 minutes talking. It was easy, natural. I found myself relaxing, the tension leaving my shoulders for the first time in weeks. When it was time for him to go, we exchanged numbers. I watched him walk to his car, a part of me certain he'd never call. Men like him didn't seek out women like me. I was standing at the sink, rinsing the plates, when another knock sounded at the door. I assumed Ethan had forgotten his keys or perhaps his phone. "Forget something?" I asked, swinging the door open with a smile still lingering on my lips. The smile died instantly, the warmth in. My chest turned to ice. Rowan stood there. The sight of him was like a physical blow to the stomach. Every ounce of pain from the day before came rushing back, the memory of him turning his back on me, leaving me bleeding on the ground to run to Emma. The realization of how little I meant to him was a bitter pill that I finally, fully swallowed. The love I had carried for him, the years of devotion and longing, felt like heavy chains. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I looked at the man I once thought I couldn't live without, and I felt nothing. I pushed the hurt deep down, locking it away in the darkest corner of my soul, right alongside his memory. Rowan was dead to me, and I didn't have to love a dead man. Chapter 8 Rowan, I watched it happen in real time. The light in her eyes didn't just dim, it vanished. 1 second there was a lingering warmth, a ghost of the woman I used to know. The next, a shutter slammed down, leaving her expression as cold and impenetrable as a sheet of ice. That coldness seeped into my own bones. "What are you doing here?" Ava asked. Her voice was flat, a monotone drone that treated my presence as an inconvenience rather than an intrusion. I didn't answer immediately. I just stood there, pushing my way past the threshold of her new life. For nearly a decade, I had shared a bed, a home, and a child with this woman, yet looking at her now, the words died in my throat. She looked at me not with anger, but with the utter indifference one might show a speck of dust on a sleeve. My eyes drifted to her arm, still bound in a medical sling. I had come to check on her. At least, that was the excuse I gave myself. It was also my weekend with Noah. But the image of the man I'd just seen leaving her house was burned into my retinas, fueling a fire in my chest I didn't want to acknowledge. He was the reason for that smile I'd caught a glimpse of. The realization made my jaw ache from clenching. "What was he doing here?" I demanded, the growl in my voice betraying the jealousy I had no right to feel. I knew the guy was a cop. I knew he'd saved her life. but he was crossing lines, and I hated the way his presence felt like a thumb in my eye. That, Ava retorted, her eyes flashing, is absolutely none of your business. It becomes my business when you're entertaining men at dawn with my son in the house, I snapped, the bitterness rising like bile. Did he sleep over? Is that why he's slinking? Out now, the thought of it turned my stomach. We had been separated for mere months, and already she was exposing Noah to strangers. It spoke volumes about the kind of woman she was turning out to be. Ava let out a short, jagged laugh, a sound devoid of any real humor. You have got to be kidding me. You're standing there judging me, while you've spent years publicly parading Emma around. The hypocrisy is staggering, Rowan. Emma is different, I hissed. Oh, right. How could I forget? She feigned a look of sudden realization, her face twisting into a mask of mockery. She's the asterisk love of your life, the one who actually matters. I ground my teeth together so hard I thought they might shatter. She was pushing me, poking at the bruises of our failed marriage with a sharp stick. I would never do anything to hurt Noah, she continued, her voice gaining a dangerous edge. But I am a single woman. I will see. Whoever I want, whenever I want. I don't plan on spending the rest of my life mourning a man who never wanted me anyway. My hands curled into fists. A strange, hot rage vibrated in my core, an animalistic urge to strike out at something. She didn't wait for a rebuttal. She simply turned her back on me and walked away. I stood in the hallway for a moment, forcing air into my lungs. As I followed the sound of clattering pans into the kitchen, I took a look around. I had never been here before. This house was nothing like the one we had shared. It was brighter, simpler, and completely devoid of my influence. It felt like a physical manifestation of her independence, and it bothered me more than I cared to admit. I found her at the counter, aggressively wiping down a surface that was already clean. She didn't look up. I'd hoped you'd have the grace to leave, she said. In case. I haven't been clear enough. You aren't welcome here. It's the weekend, Ava. I'm here for Noah, I growled, my patience thinning. He's asleep, and you could have stayed in your car and honked like you usually do. You didn't need to come inside. I pulled out a bar stool and sat down, my presence a deliberate weight in her space. She glared at me, her mouth opening to deliver another verbal blow, but I cut her off. I'll wait for him. We need to talk anyway. She gripped the dish towel until her knuckles turned white. There is nothing left to say, Rowan. We have a custody agreement. Follow it and we can go back to pretending the other doesn't exist. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Why was she being so difficult? This wasn't the submissive, quiet woman I had been married to for 9 years. That woman had been easy to ignore. This version of Ava was a live wire, sparking and dangerous. Isn't this what you wanted? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut deeper than a shout. For me to finally be out of your way? I'm not the one who filed for divorce, I reminded her, the frustration boiling over. I didn't want to fight, not today. I had a meeting with Kanta later, and my head was already spinning with the threats against my business. True, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But don't act like it wasn't the best gift you ever received. Emma comes back to town, and suddenly you're free to be with her. It's perfect timing, isn't it? I didn't lie to her, I never had. What do you want from me, Ava? You knew the truth from the start. You knew I loved her. If it wasn't for that mistake 9 years ago, she would have been my wife. I never led you on. She threw the towel onto the counter, her eyes blazing with a sudden, raw hatred. And yet, that didn't stop you from using my body for a decade, did it? To scratch an itch because the woman you actually wanted wasn't available? God, I hate you. I look at you and I wonder what I ever saw in you. I loathe every second I wasted trying to make you love me. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'm not here to talk about the past, I said, my voice tight. I'm here about Noah. She went still at the mention of our son. The fire died down, replaced by a weary exhaustion. She reached into a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of painkillers, and popped 2 into her mouth, swallowing them dry. How's the arm? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Don't, she snapped. We both know you don't care. Skip the fake concern and say what you came to say, or leave, and I'll text you when Noah wakes up. She moved to walk past me, but I reached out, my fingers closing around her uninjured wrist. She flinched as if I'd branded her with a hot iron, wrenching her arm away with a snarl. Don't touch me. Damn it, Ava, are we really going to do this forever? Snarling at each other every time we're in the same room? Maybe if you stayed out of my house, we wouldn't have to. My temper finally snapped. This childishness. This is exactly why I always preferred Emma. This is why I fell in love with her and not you. The silence that followed was deafening. Ava's face didn't crumble. It hardened into a mask of pure, crystalline spite. Say what you have to say and get out, she said, her voice ice cold. I won't have you insulting me in my own home. My behavior is no longer your concern. Go give your lectures to the love of your life. I'm sure she's perfect. I felt a pang of regret. I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have compared them, not when things were this volatile. Look, I'm sorry, that was out of line. Take your apology and shove it, she countered. Ava, fine, she shouted. Hurry up, I have things to do. Men to entertain, remember? I groaned, forcing myself to focus on the mission. Your mother and my parents are going into witness protection. It's because of the case against the gang. I want Noah to go with them. Her entire demeanor shifted. The spite vanished, replaced by a mother's instinctual fear. Why? What happened? I was the one who turned over the evidence that sank their operation. They've sent threats. They know Noah is my greatest weakness. And Emma, she added, her voice heavy with a sarcasm that didn't quite hide her worry. I ignored the jab. Your father is already dead because of these people, Ava. I am not losing my son. I can't risk it. She looked away, her chest heaving as she processed the danger. Why didn't you tell me this yesterday? You walked out before we could finish the briefing. How long? She asked. Until the threat is neutralized and the rest of them are behind bars. She nodded slowly. Despite our war, we were united in one thing. Noah was everything. Fine, I'll pack his things. You take him today, I'll spend tomorrow with him. Then he goes. Agreed, I said. She turned and headed toward the stairs to wake him. As I watched her go, a chilling realization settled in my chest. For years, I had grown used to the way Ava looked at me, with a desperate, longing hope that I would finally see her. But that look was gone. There was no love left in her eyes, not even a spark. Now, she looked at me with the same cold resentment I had spent 10 years showing her. And for some reason, that realization felt like a sentence I wasn't prepared to serve. This is a rewritten version of the chapter, crafted with a cinematic and emotionally resonant tone suitable for a storytelling narrative. Asterisk Chapter 9. The breaking point. I still don't understand why I have to go, Noah grumbled, his small face contorted into a deep frown. Why can't I just stay here, with you? He had been nursing this grievance since the moment I told him he'd be leaving with his grandparents. At first, the idea of an adventure had sparked a light in his eyes, but that light extinguished the second he realized neither I nor his father would be joining him. Even his school had been surprisingly accommodating, providing lessons for my mother to oversee so he wouldn't fall behind. But to a 7-year-old, logic is a poor substitute for comfort. I already told you, baby, I said, smoothing hair from his forehead. This is a special grandparents and grandson trip. A private vacation, just for the 3 of you. The chief had personally assured me they were being tucked away somewhere tropical, far from the shadows currently haunting our lives. You're going to the beach, I added, leaning in with a conspiratorial smile. Weren't you the one begging us for a vacation? The word beach acted like a magic spell. Instantly, his protests died in his throat. Noah didn't just like the ocean, he was obsessed with it. I remembered our trip to the Maldives. The boy had wept for a week when it was time to leave, begging us to move there or, failing that, to just leave him behind on the sand. You're not lying, right? He asked, his gray eyes searching mine for any hint of a trick. Would I ever lie to you? The frown vanished, replaced by a radiant, gap-toothed grin. I guess it's okay then, I'm not mad at you anymore. Oh, you were mad at me, I teased. Because you wouldn't come, but it's okay. You can always catch up with us later. The words caught in my throat. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I wouldn't be coming, but I couldn't risk his heartbreak again. I couldn't let him see the fear I was hiding. Now, come on, we'll be late. I slung my handbag over my good shoulder, avoiding the ache in my injured arm. Noah scrambled for his duffel bag while I grabbed his suitcase, the sound of his excited footsteps echoing down the stairs. I reached for my phone to call an Uber, but a sudden chime of the doorbell stopped me. Before I could move, Noah was already racing for the handle. Despite 1,000 warnings about strangers and safety, his curiosity always won. I opened the door and my heart didn't just sink, it grew cold. Why was it that every time I decided to excise Rowan from my life, he appeared like a ghost I couldn't exorcise? Dad! Noah shrieked, launching himself at the man standing on my porch. Hey, buddy, Rowan murmured. He pulled Noah into a tight embrace, burying his face in the boy's hair and inhaling deeply. I'd asked him once why he did that. He told me Noah's scent was the only thing that could calm his mind. Rowan set him down and finally looked at me. His expression was a familiar wall of granite. What are you doing here? I asked. It felt like the only question I'd asked him for days. He shrugged, his gaze flicking briefly to my bandaged arm. I'm here to take you to the airport. I stared at him, searching for a crack in the mask. Rowan was a man of 1,000 faces, charming for his partners, lethal for his enemies. But for me, he was always this, cold, distant, and unreadable. There's no need. I've already called an Uber, I lied. The thought of being trapped in a car with him was suffocating. Cancel it, he commanded. His voice was a low growl, the kind that used to make me shiver for all the wrong reasons. I looked at him and felt a sudden, sharp pang of regret. How had I fallen for this? He was arrogant, a jerk. And a man who treated me like an inconvenience. I should have run for the hills years ago instead of spending my youth trying to earn a glance from him. Not happening, Rowan, I whispered fiercely, stepping closer so Noah wouldn't hear. Leave, I'll meet you at the airport. He didn't move. Instead, he stepped into my personal space, his chest nearly brushing mine. His nostrils flared, a storm brewing in those dark eyes. I'm not leaving. Cancel the order and get in the car. Now. My temper, long buried under years of playing the good wife, finally snapped. You arrogant son of a bitch, I hissed, my voice trembling with rage. Who do you think you are? I am not a dog you can whistle for. This is my house and you have no power here. For years, I had stayed quiet to keep the peace. For years, I had diminished myself to fit into the small space he allowed me. And what had it bought me? Nothing but scars. Ava. He warned, his tone darkening. Are you two fighting again? Noah's small, sad voice sliced through the tension. We both froze. My heart ached at the sight of him, shoulders slumped, looking between his parents like he was waiting for something to break. No, baby, I said, forcing my features to soften. I shot a venomous side-eye at Rowan. We just can't agree on the directions. Right, Rowan? Rowan's mask shifted instantly. For Noah, he could be human. Sure. Your mom wanted an Uber because she can't drive with her arm, but I thought it'd be better if we all drove together. Why can't we just go with Dad, Mommy? Noah asked, his eyes wide and hopeful. I looked at my son, then at the smug, silent challenge in Rowan's eyes. I was trapped. Fine, I grumbled, defeated. Let's go. The car ride was a masterpiece of discomfort. Noah was buried in his tablet, oblivious to the war of silence happening in the front seat. Rowan drove with one hand on the wheel, a look that I used to find infuriatingly attractive, a thought I now tried to scrub from my brain. How's the arm? He asked, his eyes remaining on the road. Fine. Can you give me more than one word, Ava? He snapped, his jaw tightening. Why? You've spent the last few years perfecting the art of ignoring me. Why the sudden interest in conversation? He didn't answer. He couldn't. We both knew I was right. I turned my head to the window, watching the city blur by, praying for the miles to disappear. Your mother was asking for you, he tried again. Haven't you spoken to her? I let out a harsh, dry laugh. You're awfully chatty today, Rowan. It's grating. Why don't you go back to pretending I don't exist? It's what you're best at. I saw his knuckles turn white on the steering wheel. He didn't like this new version of me, the one that didn't beg for his affection, the one that didn't try to be like Emma. I was no longer a meek lamb, and the fact that he couldn't control me was clearly eating him alive. It was the first bit of satisfaction I'd felt in a long time. We arrived at the airport an hour later. The tarmac was crawling with security, cops Rowan knew, men who worked for the family. Noah was a ball of energy, dragging me toward his grandparents. I kept my head high, ignoring the rest of the family gathering. Emma was there, of course, standing beside Travis and Gabe. I had no interest in playing nice with people who had treated me like a ghost for years. Rowan unloaded the bags and walked over to the group. I watched as he greeted his friends, then turned to Emma. Right there, in front of everyone, in front of me, asterisk, he wrapped an arm around her and pressed a lingering kiss to her forehead. The disrespect was a physical blow, a sharp twist of the knife. I forced myself to look away, refusing to let them see me bleed. 5 minutes until departure, the pilot announced. I felt their eyes on me. They were waiting for the old Ava to emerge, the one who would cry or beg or seek a scrap of validation. I gave them nothing. I stood like stone. Noah went down the line, saying goodbye to his father and the guys. When he reached Emma, the air turned brittle. Noah, say goodbye to Emma, Rowan said, his voice laced with irritation. Noah shrugged, his expression blank. I don't know her. Why should I say goodbye? The silence that followed was deafening. I felt a wicked spark of pride. Before Rowan could scold him, Noah turned and threw his arms around my waist, clinging to me. I'm going to miss you so much, my love, I whispered, my voice thick with the tears I'd been holding back. I'll miss you too, Mommy. Promise you'll call every day? I promise. An officer gently took Noah's hand, leading him toward the plane. My mother stepped forward then, looking as if she wanted to hug me, a gesture I didn't recognize from her. Please don't, I said, stepping back. The tears in her eyes didn't move me. Years of neglect had built a wall she couldn't climb over in a single day. "Take care of yourself, Ava," she said softly. "We'll look after him." I simply nodded. I watched as the cabin door closed, and minutes later, the engines roared to life. I stayed until the plane was nothing more than a silver speck in the vast blue sky. My heart felt like it had been ripped out, but for the first time I knew he was safe. As I walked toward the airport exit, my phone buzzed in my hand. "Rowan," I didn't hesitate. I declined the call, hailed a taxi, and as the phone began to vibrate again, I powered it off completely. For the first time in my life, I was going home to a house that was entirely mine. And for the first time, I was perfectly fine with being alone. This is a rewritten version of Chapter 10, crafted with a more evocative, dramatic tone suitable for a narrative-driven storytelling video. Chapter 10, The Ghost of a Smile 7 Days. It had been a full week since Noah left, and I was still a ghost haunting the corners of my own life. I haven't found a rhythm yet, a way to breathe without him there. This is the longest we've ever been apart, and if I'm being honest, I'm falling apart at the seams. Noah is my anchor. Without him, I'm nothing but a shipwreck, drifting aimlessly through a gray, indifferent sea. I live for his phone calls. Every time the screen lights up with his name, the world stops spinning. His voice is the only thing that keeps my feet touching the ground. As for Rowan, silence. I haven't heard a word from him since that final, freezing moment at the airport. A stubborn, aching part of my heart still calls out for him, but I drown it out. I have to. There was no future there, only the slow suffocation of living with a man who looked at me and saw nothing worth loving. For now, the world is quiet. The shadows that haunted us have retreated. Since the echoes of the last shootouts faded, the criminals seem to have crawled back into whatever dark holes they came from, or maybe they're just waiting. I was lost in the fog of these thoughts, my head down as I walked, when the world suddenly jolted. Thud! The impact knocked the breath out of me. My books went flying, sprawling across the pavement like broken wings. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking," I stammered, immediately dropping to my knees to gather my things. It had been a long, grueling day at school, and all I wanted was the sanctuary of my bed. "It's all right. I wasn't exactly watching the compass either." That voice. It was deep, warm, and instantly recognizable. I snapped my head up. Ethan. He was already on the ground, helping me gather my papers. When our eyes met, he flashed a smile so charming it felt like a physical warmth. I couldn't help it. I smiled back. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice slightly breathless. He was in full uniform, and God, he wore it well. I might have sworn off men for the foreseeable future. But I wasn't blind. The silver badge, the crisp lines of the fabric over his broad shoulders, he was a sight to behold. "We got a tip about someone dealing to the kids around here," he said, his expression sobering for a second before his eyes twinkled again. "And let me guess, you're a teacher here." He arched a suggestive eyebrow. "I am," I replied, suddenly feeling very self-conscious. It wasn't the glamorous career people expected from the wife of a billionaire. My parents had made their disappointment clear, constantly comparing my modest life to my sister Emma's high-powered law career or Travis's entrepreneurial success. To them, I was just a teacher, another mark against me in the family ledger. "So, what's the specialty?" Ethan asked. He actually sounded interested, his gaze focused entirely on me. It was a sharp contrast to Rowan. In all our time together, Rowan had never asked about my day. I'm not even sure he knew what I taught. "Biology," I said. "Beauty and brains," he winked, the flirtation as effortless as breathing. "I like that." I felt the heat creep up my neck, and I tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Thanks." Ethan made me nervous, but a good kind of nervous. I wasn't used to this, to being seen. In my world, I was the mouse. Next to a golden, statuesque blonde like Emma, I was invisible. Plain brown hair, plain brown eyes, a petite frame that barely left a shadow. I'd spent my whole life being told I was the background character. The girl boys only talked so they could get an introduction to my sister. "Listen, I'm sorry I haven't called," Ethan said after a moment of comfortable silence. "It's been chaos at the precinct. No free time at all." I smiled, though a small, cynical voice in my head whispered it was just an excuse. "It's okay, Ethan, I get it. Being a cop isn't a 9-to-5 job." We stood there for a beat too long. I shifted my weight, feeling the awkwardness settle in. He just stared at me, his blue eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me want to look away, and yet I couldn't. "Ethan!" A voice barked from down the street. Another officer was waving him over. "Coming!" Ethan shouted back. He turned back to me, his expression softening. It was good. To see you, beautiful, I'll see you around, yeah? Yeah, I whispered. Before I could react, he pulled me into an unexpected hug. He smelled like crisp air and something spicy, and for a second I felt safe. Then, he was gone, leaving me standing on the sidewalk wondering what on earth had just happened. I forced myself to keep moving. I needed groceries, and the walk would do my sore shoulder some good. The sling was off, but the dull ache remained, a constant reminder of the chaos I'd barely escaped. As I walked, my mind was a whirlwind. Ethan's words echoed in my head. Beautiful. Nobody ever called me that. If my own husband found me repulsive, how could a man like Ethan see anything else? Stop it, I scolded myself. Bitter laugh escaping my lips. He's just being polite. A guy like that doesn't look twice at a girl like you. I finished my shopping quickly, just the essentials since the house felt too empty to cook real meals anyway. I stepped out of the store, my bags heavy in my hands, planning to hail a taxi. I hadn't driven today, my shoulder was too stiff to trust the steering wheel. I raised my hand to flag a cab, but my arm froze midair. Across the street, the world turned to ice. Rowan and Emma. They were walking hand in hand, their fingers entwined like they belonged together. I don't know where they were going, and I didn't care. Emma whispered something into his ear, and Rowan did something I hadn't seen in years. He laughed. It was a deep, rich, joyous sound that filled the air. He threw his head back, his face glowing with a happiness he had never, not once, shared with me. The pain I had tried so hard to bury came roaring back, a tidal wave of salt and glass. It felt like my heart was being physically crushed in my chest. If only he had given me a single chance. I would have given him the world, I would have made him happy. But he didn't want my world, he only wanted Emma. As if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Rowan turned. He sensed me. The laughter died instantly. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by a dark, hard scowl. It was like I was a smudge of dirt on a pristine window. I was the bringer of his sorrow, the shadow that ruined his light. He stepped toward the curb as if to cross the street, to confront me, to pity me. I didn't stay to find out. I dived into the first taxi that pulled up. Just drive, I rasped to the driver. I refused to look back. I refused to watch them. He had moved on. It was easy for him because he had never been anchored to me in the first place. He was free while I was still drowning. No more, I told myself, clutching my grocery bags until my knuckles turned white. I don't care how long it takes or how much it hurts. Rowan is the past. It's time I finally start looking for my own light.